So I'll start by looking at scouting attacking play. This is a nice diagram here of Declan Rice showing what he does. And again, what we're doing now is when we were in lesson 3, we talked a lot about context of particular actions and normalization. Now, and we said, well, what we're missing is a value model. Now we have a value model. We have action-based expected threat. And now we want to go back and we want to find the context. So this shows some context of what Declan Rice does very well. So this is just one match, West Ham versus Burnley. And these are the areas on the pitch which he has generated the most expected threat from. And there's definitely the central area here, but then also out here wider on the wing. So we can get, what does Declan Rice do very well? Well, he plays very well centrally, but he also, in this particular match, produced quite a lot of crosses in from here. So this was considered by our model to be the best possible pass. Maybe it was collected here. Often these passes can end up in cutbacks. And then the other two were these types of passes. So any through ball near to the into the penalty area is going to be highly valued. This one was valued at 10%. This one was valued at 5.5%. In this particular model, we're not just using the start and the end coordinates. We're also using if things were across or not. If this might have been labeled as a through ball by the data provider while this wasn't. And so that means that gives the differences there. So we're using a whole load of features inside the machine learning model in order to give those expected threats, which start to sort of pick out differences again between the different patterns. But the important point I want to make here is about context. Now we don't just know how much in total expected threat he generated. It was almost 1 goal worth of expected threat during the match, but we also know where it was generated from. And if you were scouting Declan Rice and thinking of signing him, this would be very useful information, not just for this match, but you might want to look at it over a season. And I'll give an example of this then. This is now a player radar. And the player radars are no longer just based on how many times Declan Rice or Christian Eriksen, who's the other player here, does a particular action. They're based on the value produced when they do that action. And you can see Christian Eriksen I took up because, and this was his season at Brentford, he was top out of all players playing in these midfield positions in terms of danger produced by passes and dangers produced by passes from the mid to the final third. Declan Rice, on the other hand, was rated maybe top 75% in these particular qualities. He was stronger on ball carries, but again, Eriksen is a little bit stronger on dribbles. The point here is that everything here is based on the value that it adds, not just the number of actions. And this, I think, to me, this indicates that Eriksen very much proved himself in Brentford. He was the top player. And for a central midfielder, this probably is the most important quality that you're looking for, your pass totals and your pass from mid to final. And he was very, very much on top of those. Again, context, playing for Brentford as well, which is more difficult than if you're Thiago playing for Liverpool. So Eriksen, very good player that season. We can also do ranking. Again, this is just to show where Eriksen comes up top. I mentioned Thiago. He was third on the particular pass total statistic. We can list all of these different qualities of the players, find out who's the strongest. Eriksen, I didn't put crosses in the radar, but Eriksen was also top on crosses. This is one that I've used in Hammarby. This was something that we did when we were looking at the Swedish Cup. I've used both XG build-up, how involved they were in producing expected goals, and also this point here for Bazara, this is just in one particular match, shows the expected threat he generates and where he generates it. The main point I wanted to make here is there's 3 or 4 of these dangerous passes that send a player down the wing, possibly setting them up for a cutback and so on. But there's also quite a lot of sort of ball rotation here, which gets picked up by this measure and given some value. So Pizarro was a particularly valuable player and has been a very valuable player for Hammarby this season, but not always moving the ball forward. Some of these move the ball forward, but a lot of the points that he's picking up, or the expected threat he's picking up, is moving the ball backwards and forwards and round. Again, not something that position-based expected threat picks up, but is very well picked up by action-based expected threat. Now, I've kind of skipped over a lot of defensive things, and there's a couple of reasons for this. One is it's more difficult, right? I said right at the start of when we started scouting, I said, look, how are we going to scout defenders if tackling isn't a good thing to do? And that is a lot of the problem with using any of these things. Don't go away just because you can put a value. If you're a player who's rescuing the ball on a goal line all the time, that's going to come up as a high valued action, right? But is that really what you want to be doing as a defender, always doing goal line rescues? Can be useful in some cases, but maybe it shows some weaknesses elsewhere. But you can still use this to get a rough idea. What you have to do is you have to remember the limitations of this. And what one model, or the model that we use at 12 does, is it assigns, we call it expected defense, and it assigns values on interceptions and clearances in two different ways. One of them is to do with getting the ball back in your own box, which is highly valuable, but it's also very valuable to get the ball back in the attacker's half. And so for ball recovery, this is one of the more dangerous events that you can do. You recover the ball. And so we can then look at, for example, we look at Pontus Jansson. His expected defensive contributions are all from actions within his own box, or a majority of them are for actions inside his own box. And we can give expected defense points during the match. This is for a particular match, Brentford versus Tottenham. And then we can also make a radar for him. And I think that this is quite interesting because I think an interception is always going to be a positive defensive stat. Even if tackles aren't the most important, making lots of interceptions is very important. Not being dribbled past, which is shown here. We always put good things on the outside of the radar, is another very positive property, and recovery is also a very positive property. Okay, last one here. Or is it the last one? Yeah, maybe it's the second last one. But performance during the match. I think that these ones are very nice. This is starting with one did for Hammarby. The green, so the normal expected goal shot maps at the top. And at the bottom, we have expected threat during the game. And you can see in this match against Norrköping, for example, we dominated much of the first 60 minutes, but then we let them dominate the match for the last 30 minutes. This is very good for picking out, and I've seen this in countless examples where I've been working with teams with this. It's very good for picking out patterns in how a team is performing throughout the whole 90 minutes. That said, there's a lot of context to this thing. This is an example where Everton played against Liverpool, and you can see that even though, and I think this is a very nice way of looking into this, because you can contrast the expected threat with the expected goal. Now, if you're dominating the match with lots of a high level of expected threat, and you're also producing lots of expected goals, then everything's good, right? But Liverpool weren't doing that. They were, for the first 60 minutes of the match, they were dominating the possession. They were generating lots of dangerous passes in Everton's half, but they weren't converting any of that into goal chances. Finally, I want to just mention a nice application that I've been very involved with. We have a fantasy football app based on expected threat. I'm not going to say too much about that, but if you do want to download it, and I think it's, I mean, one of the reasons we created this was that it helps people learn about what is a good action in football and what is not such a good action in football. You can download it yourself and have a look at, watch a Premier League match or an Allsvenskan match, and look at how we're assigning the points live while you're actually watching the match. That's all for today. If you're following the course, you pretty much have everything you need to start doing the scouting exercise from these two videos. So we now have a way of looking at context, a way of looking at value, way of normalizing. Put these together, start creating your own scouting metrics, and find some good players in the data. Good luck.